Welcome to the Hunt Test Hobo Podcast, your place for truckside chats and insights into the retriever game. Whether you're just getting started or you're a seasoned handler, this podcast is another resource for tips, tricks, and insights from both the amateurs and professional trainers' perspectives. Each week, we'll dive into the nitty-gritty of retriever training, sharing stories of success, overcoming challenges, and forging stronger bonds with our dogs. This is the Hunt Test Hobo Podcast. I'm Chris Rudd, your host, fellow retriever enthusiast, and student of the game. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Hunt Test Hobo Podcast. Today I am joined by Elliot Snider with a lot of different brands. I mean, I'm going to let Elliot kind of talk through them. The one that I know him from originally was freelance duck hunting on YouTube. But before we jump into this, Elliot, why don't you tell me a little bit about kind of your story with all the YouTube and all the podcasts that you're doing?
Sure. How in depth do you want me to go?
Well, I'll just say this. I'll start off by saying this. When I first got into hunting, my grandfather, took me on my first duck hunt, and I was hooked. Like, that was pretty much it. Mm-hmm. But in Illinois, there is like no public land and the idea of freelancing just like doesn't exist. I mean, I think it's pretty similar. Like, I listen to a lot of Jordan Former's podcast and stuff, and it's probably very similar to Indiana, but I loved the whole idea of freelancing and scouting and doing all that. And honestly, your camping stuff, like the whole Chef Boyardee and stuff like that, is like what influenced the name of the Hunt Test Hobo podcast, because like you were the first person that I was like, okay, that guy is figuring it out by like whatever he's got to do to go find those birds he's doing. Right. And I kind of translated that into the Hunt Test game, where, I would just, I would be sitting on Google Maps or on X and just looking for stuff that looked like tech water. And then I'd be like knocking on the door, like, hey, can I I'm pretty sure you're a dog person. Because are these fingers? Yeah. Okay. Can I train on your grounds? And then like, awesome. I'd be driving 3 hours. So then I would just I converted my truck to sleep in the back of it to be efficient. And, anyway, so that's kind of the inspiration. But to go back to the question, I think it's important for listeners to kind of learn a little bit about who you are. I'll brag on you for a little bit. I don't know if you have one of the largest YouTube channels for duck hunting, but it's got to be pretty stinking close to one of the biggest. And I think, how many seasons have you done now? 9. So this one coming up will be year 10. Year 10. That's awesome. Yeah, but I think it's been 6 years I've been following you. My favorite thing was all your kayak hunting, because my parents have property up in the UP, and that's like the only place that there's like public land, like abundant, and there's no birds, but there's public land. And man, I would like drag that kayak into places and shoot one bird, but I'd like decked out my kayak exactly the way you had built it for Izzy, with a little hood and stuff. Right. And, my dog's so anyway, that was cool. So tell me a little bit about, why did you start the YouTube channel, and kind of like what it's been like doing it.
Sure. So my dad always had video cameras when I was growing up. So we've got old video of prairie chicken hunting from the 80s. He was not making like videos. He was just like doing the old dad home videos. So there was no editing or anything. Someone puts in their home video cassette and you're watching an hour and a half of just like garbage, but my dad always had a camera around, and he filmed a lot of just stuff that we did in fishing and hunting. He was just there with the camera. And so there was that influence. And then around, I think he started spreadsheeting his waterfowl hunts sometime probably around 2005, where he was keeping notes and started a spreadsheet. And I had waterfowl hunted quite a bit, but I really got the bug like it is now around 2006. So I started my waterfowl hunting career was 91, but it turned into all right, I'm going out every single weekend, every chance I can. That started in 2006. It was it was more casual. I loved it, but it was more casual, and it turned into kind of what it is now. Starting around that time. So in 2006, I took over my dad's spreadsheet and I started updating it kind of the way that I wanted it to look. So it was kind of an early form of the app I have now. So it kept track of how many shots did you fire, what was the weather, where were you hunting, and then the spreadsheet would kick out all these numbers as to bird per hunt average, totals. We had like even a record board just between my dad and I, and so this thing kept getting refined, and it had a note section. And around 2013, at the beginning of every waterfowl season, I would go back through my spreadsheet and look at the notes. And I kept telling my dad, I was like, man, a lot of these hunts, I'm not remembering enough of what happened on them. I can kind of remember just a little bit, but we've got so many hunts stacked up. I want to be able to remember more of what was going on. So I told him, I said, I'm going to start a video vlog where after the hunt, I just talk about the hunts. And I'd been telling him about this for about 2 years and he just didn't do it. And then finally 2015, it never actually ended up being what I thought it was going to be. I was literally just going to, after the hunt, I was just going to talk and have a recording of the hunt so I could go back and listen to it. But I just took a camera on the first hunt of 2015 and I made a 3.5 minute video of a teal hunt that I went on. And at that time, I had never uploaded a video to YouTube ever. And I just put it on there so that I could link it to my dad and people could watch it. My family could watch it. There was never any kind of intent for other people to watch it. YouTube, even back at that time, like 2015, it wasn't, at least for me, it wasn't like, what did it say? There was virtually no YouTube waterfowl presence at that time like there is now. There was no regular guys just filming.
Yeah,
there were
the
like the
TV
grind
shows.
Yeah, right. There was the grind was on there. There was some high produced stuff, but there was zero individuals doing just like what you see now, which is what YouTube waterfowling is now, where you're talking in the camera and you're just basically vlogging. And I didn't do a whole lot of vlogging on that video, but I posted it and I'm like, oh my gosh, people are actually kind of watching it. I mean, for me, for 200 people to watch a video was like, holy crap. Like, people I don't know are watching this thing. And so that season, I put every video up. And as it got going, I think it took me about a year to hit 1,000 subscribers. But at some point in there, I realized, like, people like this. At the same time, Josh from Outdoor Limits was doing the same thing. That was his first season too. So he and I were the first two YouTube waterfowl vloggers. And his channel is like almost 3 times the size of mine. He's surpassed me greatly. He's a wonderful guy. And so that's kind of how the channel just got started. At some point, it totally changed from a vlog, from I just want to remember my hunts. Like, okay, people are watching this. It was fun. I was getting great feedback and it was really fun to have people watch my hunts. And so it just kind of snowballed, and it got to the point where I was like, I'm going to really try. I'm going to try at this. I'm going to see what I can do, see what kind of following I can get going. And I remember I used to joke with my son, and YouTube, you do not make a ton of money. To make a lot of money on YouTube, really, you have to get like a couple million views a month if you want to make significant money. I'm doing about 1.5 million views a year, which is, I mean, to me, that's crazy to think of. That's a lot of views. My channel's done about 10 million or 12 million views total. That's
crazy.
Something like that. But to actually make good money, you need to have over 1 million views a month.
Yeah.
And so, if I'm making 1.5 million views a year, that's pretty awesome. And it's not like you're making money on it. I mean, you get some, but not anything not even a part-time job. It's not much. But I would joke with my son, because at that time you got monetized right off the bat. So I'd be like, I got 3 cents. I made 3 cents. And then my goal became to get 1 check, because you don't get paid until you get it to $100. So my goal became, I want 1 check for $100. Wouldn't that be the coolest thing in the world? Just to actually someone pay me $100 for people watching my dumb duck hunts. And that season, the first 2 seasons, we didn't hardly kill anything. They were 2 of my worst seasons ever. So, and there was no kill shots. It was like just us goofing around. But now the name, one thing I'll say about the name freelance duck hunting came from Wade Bourne on Ducks Unlimited TV used to use the phrase freelance duck hunting, because all those produced shows are typically, I can't even stand watching them, because I won't watch a duck hunt if it's in a field, a dry field. I've got no interest. And especially if it's with a guide, I've got zero interest to watch someone hunting with a guide. I'm not opposed to people using guides, but I have zero interest watching it. And so Ducks Unlimited did a lot of that, but every now and then they would go on to public. And I loved Wade Bourne. I don't know if you know who he is, but he's dead now, unfortunately. But I just loved him as a host. And every now and then they would go on a freelance duck hunt on public land, and those were the episodes that I would just rewatch because you could find them on YouTube, and I would just rewatch them. And I was like, that's what we do. We freelance duck hunt. And so I hate when people call me freelance duck hunting. It's like, I'm not. That's the name of the channel. It's about all of us guys who freelance duck hunt. Yeah, you are seeing the public land hunter's life. It is freelance duck hunting. So
yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
You made me think about just something that I think is really cool, and this is maybe more for content creators than perhaps the listeners of this podcast. But I work for a marketing firm, and all the time people are like coming like, "Hey, I want to start a podcast," and they always come with the motive of, "I think I'll make some money or I'll grow my product." And every time I'm like, dude, this is never going to work. Like, you're going to pay me to help you do this for some time, and then it's just going to flake out because you're not actually in it for the right reason. It's one or two reasons normally. There's a problem, a fundamental problem that you believe so passionately that you need to help somebody solve, and you don't care, how much time you're going to invest. You're just going to use podcasting as a platform to talk about that problem and to try to solve that problem, which is like what my passion is like, I want to bring as much content to amateur trainers as I can. And that's the whole reason for doing this. Like, I'm not in it for any sort of money. I mean, like,
I'll kind of passionate about
it. Maybe it'll be a joke if I make $1, like, hey, look, I made $1. But what's cool about you and every other content creator that I talk to that has success, it's always about, it started as something else and then became, what it is today, because you did it because you wanted to remember your hunts. It was like a time capsule, type of thing. So, and that may not be interesting to anybody that's listening. I just think that like, props to you for doing something that you just enjoyed, that you felt like other people were going to want to do, and you're listening to what your followers are saying, and you're creating more content. We talked briefly like about before the podcast started, and I didn't know a single thing about duck hunting. And after my first duck hunt, I went home and I was like, YouTube duck hunting, and your video showed up, and I watched your video, and I was like, dude, this is like a whole like little YouTube show. It was honestly the first time that I had ever actually like fallen in love with YouTube. Like, all of my employees were like on their lunch break just watching YouTube videos, and I was like, why do you watch YouTube videos? You can watch Netflix. And then I like discovered micro content, and I was like, holy cow. And like what you and Josh and Jordan were doing. And then when you guys did the Flyways Collective, I was so hooked. But like, really,
you get connected to the people.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing with YouTube, is you get connected to the person. That's why you don't have to do high production stuff on YouTube. Yeah. You give my videos to like a film producer, it's trash. It's absolute trash. It's not high production. It's you're showing a regular guy showing what he's doing, and you form a pseudo relationship with the people you like on YouTube, and you get hooked by it. It's a cool thing. It's a totally different animal than those old outdoor TV shows.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but like, you taught me the importance of scouting, and I'm a member of our situation up here in Illinois is a little different. So almost pretty much we dry field hunt. I have maybe access to 9 properties, and like there's 2 places that I can go and like technically freelance, but like there's almost no public land here unless you have, a boat, and then you're fighting with 20 other guys to get, and you're on top of each other. But yeah, we have a club here that's got about 300 members, and we lease 90 fields, and it's a draw system to get into that field that day. And we don't have that many people that are actually hunting most days, but I feel like I'm freelancing because I'm competing with these other 300 members, to find the birds that are in these fields, to understand what they're doing and what's going on, and not just looking at kill reports. So like I've like thought about like buying like a little Honda Civic because I can like make the rounds and not be driving my truck. But anyway, I just like that was the biggest thing that I learned from you was, you know, like you got to have really good proper concealment, and even more important than that is like you got to be where the birds are, and you got to understand what they're doing. So I've like really enjoyed it. I'm on your app. I don't think I did much last year because I had a bunch of stuff going on, but 2 years ago, I'm the guy that's me on your thing.
Oh yeah. Okay. Right.
Because I don't know if I did it right, but my email is me@chrisrudd.com.
Yeah. So it just shows it's me.
So just me. So I was like, that looks ridiculous, but like, I don't know. And honestly, I thought it was just like your app just put you as me. Until I finally realized like, oh no, that's my email.
Yeah. Well, eventually you're going to be able to change your ID. That's in the works. So eventually, but I do remember that. That's funny. No, one of my old like Yahoo Games names used to be It's Me was the name of it. So I liked that one when I saw it. I was like, oh, nice. It's me.
Yeah. me. No. So, but anyway, just to give you a little background, like we shoot a ton of Canadas up here. Like that's pretty much all we shoot. I mean, we'll shoot, you know, we'll have days when it rains and we'll, you know, we're in corn. We'll shoot, you know, a limit of mallards, but man, like, I'm like, I love just trying to find birds, man. So like, there's a couple places that I drive out to that's like 2 hours away, but I'll drive there, I'll camp, and then I'll just scout these, you know, 3 little waterways. Man, if I kill like 20 ducks in water, I feel like I accomplished something each year. But we have so many geese, it's like it's crazy.
So you're more of a goose hunter than by just having to be.
Just having to be, yeah. Right. I mean, I mean, if you look at the first month of my season, you know, I go up to the UP like Jordan does, and I do a little. I work my way down. There, I'm shooting ducks, but pretty much once it gets to the season, our goose hunting is like, it's so crazy good. Honestly, like there's a big reservoir or a nuclear power plant just south of us, and they used to just go to that, and that place would just load up with birds. But now, we have so many retention ponds around the city of Chicago that they just pile in there. And now we're starting to get mallards that are piling up there. Like last year we had a group of like 200 something mallards land in our spread. Like, nice. Like we're just, anyway, I'm glad we're talking about duck hunting because I just want to set up kind of who you are a little bit because, you know, like you're like a, I don't know, a coach to me that's never met me. So
I appreciate that.
I just had to take a little bit of time to do that. And it's funny because like as a video production person, like I have to edit a lot of videos, and I don't edit as much as I used to, but in the past I would sit and edit people for like hours, and then they'd come into the studio and I'd be like, hi, I know everything about you because I've watched your face for the last like 3 weeks. I've been looking at your face. So I kind of feel like that same way right now. So it's a little awkward, but hey, it is what it is.
Well, that makes me feel really good. We really need strong presences on YouTube in the waterfowl world because there's a lot of negative ones, and a lot of young guys getting into the sport are learning their behaviors from YouTube. So, you know, the better. I'm glad to hear that I can be that somewhat, because I do think in waterfowl hunting there's a right way and a wrong way to conduct yourself for sure. And so that makes me happy to hear.
Yeah, awesome. Well, why don't we talk about dogs for a little bit, since this is the Hunt Test Hobo podcast. Tell me a little bit about your dog journey, you know, you and your dad, and let's work our way up to just kind of Georgie and what you're doing now.
Sure. So a hunting dog started our waterfowl career, basically. My dad got a pointing lab in, I think, 1990, a black lab is a pointing lab. And he decided that we were going to do a little bit of duck hunting, which I had kind of been begging him a little bit. I went out duck hunting when I was 13 one time and loved it, but we were upland game and prairie chicken hunters. And so my dad, for whatever reason, got this dog and decided we were going to do a little duck hunting. And once we started duck hunting, that's just all. We never turned back. So he had this dog professionally trained. So it was not a hunt test dog, but it was a well-behaved, high-octane black lab. And so my hunting has always been with a dog. I moved away about 3 hours when I went to college, and about the time, late 90s, I got my first dog. and it was just a dog out of the paper. It was such an impulse decision. It was like $15 for a half golden, half lab. And my wife and I were just like, let's go get a dog. And I'm like, yeah, and it can be my hunting dog. I mean, there was no thought to it at all. And I did not train it at all. We lived in this 3rd-story apartment, and it was just an absolute train wreck. It wasn't steady, but its desire was intense. So I always had to tie it up, and this dog was just a train wreck, not fun to hunt with at all. And so that dog died. I got my next dog. I got Izzy, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to actually try to train this dog. So I got the book, The Water Dog, and that's what I trained Izzy with, was the water dog. And I just wanted a meat dog, though. I knew my goals right from the start. Chris always talks about, know the career of your dog. And the career of my dog was be steady, bring the bird back to hand. So I did the training myself, and she was steady. I went through force fetch, but something I did wrong in force fetch, because she wouldn't always retrieve. The colder it got, the worse she would get about bringing it back to hand. And she didn't take any hand signals, but she was super easy to hunt with. She was relaxed and calm, and easiest dog to hunt with. I loved her, and she picked up tons of ducks, but she was slow, methodical. She almost seemed like sometimes to have ducks in her mouth was disgusting to her. I could just tell it was like something genetically made her do it, but she really didn't even like having them. She wouldn't pick up ducks or geese in the field ever. But I never hunt in the field. So it was a step up from dog 1, but still training wise, it met my goals. But after she was steady, I didn't even train her after she was steady and doing the job. She was just a good old meat dog. So and she was on a bunch of my videos. From season 1 to 4 or 5, she was my main hunting dog during that time. And so if people watch those, they would have seen her. So she got old, ended up having some injuries. I had to put her to sleep. And I got Georgie from Flatlander Kennels, and I got so lucky. At that point, my channel was doing pretty well, and so I was looking for promotional partners. So I thought, you know what, I need a new dog. My dad had actually his second dog. He went through the Hunt Test thing, and so he was all over Nebraska. His second dog got her HRCH, and he did a little bit of AKC stuff, but never titled there. So my dad had really put the effort in on that dog. Which, man, at that time for an amateur, because, now you've got so many resources at your disposal now. Yeah. And back then, to gain that knowledge back then before the internet versus now, can you imagine as an amateur how much more difficult that would be? So kudos to him. I
can't believe people that can do it.
Really. I mean, really. And he got it done. So I had been exposed to the Hunt Test stuff a little bit from my dad. I never went to any events, but I knew he was doing it. And that dog of his was phenomenal dog. So I needed a dog. So I started putting out form letters to trainers, breeders and trainers in Nebraska. I was like, hey, I would love you. Give me a dog and I'll promote you. And I think this will really work well for both of us. And luckily I sent one to Chris Jobman. And he was in the truck at the time with Eric Tizon, who was kind of running his social media. Because Chris is not a social media guy, not a technology guy. And so he got the email in the truck with Eric, and Eric's like, you should do it. So Chris called me back on the phone, which, I mean, good Lord, talk about hitting a grand slam with that one. To have Chris Jobman be the one to call me back. So he gave me Georgie, and in return, I just did a lot of promotion. I mean, I just spread the name of Flatliner Kennels through my videos. And I mean, people who watch my stuff just love Georgie and think that she's the baddest dog on the planet. People that don't do hunt test. It's funny because I was at Chris's, and he's had several people be like, oh, that's Flash. That's Georgie's dad. Like, Georgie is the really beast. And like Flash is just this little, because they don't know what Flash is. They're just watching my videos. And I thought that was kind of funny. I was like, yeah, Georgie's the real one there.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because like I saw this kind of like developing as I was watching the channel, and I was probably like, from a timeline standpoint, I was probably like 2 years in front of you of like, I had started Hunt Test and I started to know who people are and, all that. And then I remember like you said, Jobman, Flash, and I went and looked up the pedigree and I looked up your breeding. I'm like, oh my gosh, he's going from Izzy's personality to this dog.
Oh my
and
Lord.
I was like, I almost wanted to be like, hey, just so you know, this is going to be a lot different. Like,
Yeah.
but
Georgie's
I was like,
a
you know what?
lot of dog.
I'm just gonna watch this happen, and I'm gonna see what's gonna happen.
Man, the podcast coming out tomorrow. Chris and I talk all about Georgie's performance and the issues I'm having with her. It's just control, manners, line manners, and she's just like on crack to retrieve this dog. Just, I mean, polar opposite of my last dog. But the good thing is she's super calm in the house. She is the calmest dog in the house. But outside, man, when it comes to hunt test time or hunting time, she is an absolute beast. Just so anyway.
For those that aren't listening, Flash is a is it 9-time grand dog? Like how many?
Something like 7 or 8 time grand champion.
And then anyway, and she was bred to an HRCH QA.
Isla, she was bred to Isla, and Isla had her grand.
Okay,
she's a grand champion as well.
Awesome.
In fact, there's an awesome story behind Isla, but I won't go into it. But she's a real sentimental dog to Chris, and he actually cried when she got her title, or teared up. I mean, bawled or anything.
I think I know the story. Yeah, we don't need to get into it.
Yeah, but her pedigree. When I got Georgie, Flash didn't. He was a little bit younger, so Chris said this is gonna be a Hall of Fame dog. He's like, this is going to be a Hall of Fame dog. Because at the same time, his previous dog, Jet, had a litter. Jet was a Hall of Fame dog. And so this was the lesser of the breeding, but looking back at it, it's probably the better of that. That litter has produced some absolute insane animals from that exact same litter. So when I got Georgie from Chris, the one thing he said to me, he was concerned. He said, well, how do I know that you are going to be able, because he would have trained Georgie for me, but I want to do it myself, and probably foolish on my part, but I just want to go through the process. I want to go through the process. To me, that's part of it. It's the bond. I want to be that dog's everything. And he said, how do I know that basically you won't screw this up? And, here's this Flatliner Kennels dog and it's not steady and it's just a train wreck. And so that lit a fire under me for sure. And so I started using the retrievertrainer.com, Freddie King's system. And then, of course, I had Chris talking to me. And when I got to e-collar and force fetch, I used Chris's long form audio that we did on the Duck Gun podcast, which was phenomenal. So I just decided, I was like, you know what? I'm going to try the hunt test thing. I'm just going to see, because I'm going through all these steps. I mean, I'm doing casting and all that. I mean, I was going right up through and everything was going pretty well. I was going really, really slow. I was going really, really slow. I mean, we got up to, I went on timeline, but I was just going nice and slow and steady through the whole thing. And I went to a local HRC hunt test training day, and I was like, oh, wow, I'm way farther away. Cause I didn't know the terminology. I didn't know dogs weren't allowed to cheat the bank. I knew nothing about that kind of stuff. I was just following Freddie's system, but I didn't know the hunt test game at all. People would use lingo and I'd be like, I don't know what you're talking about. I felt like a fool when I went to that, but everyone was nice, but I just realized I don't know anything. And this dog is nowhere close to being ready for this type of thing. Cause they were throwing up a setup that's probably like a season level setup. And I had no idea how to handle. I mean, talk about complete novice. But I realized I wanted to see if I could do it. My goal became the HRCH, because I figured if I get the HRCH, then I can tell myself I've got a world-class dog and I've done it justice. If I can get it to that level. I mean, if Chris owned Georgie, she'd probably already have her. I know she would already have her grand. She'd probably would. She just would. But that's okay. This is my first dog I've ever done this with. I've never put it in this kind of ever with a dog. The whole handling thing is a learning curve. The whole training thing, all this stuff is just brand new. So there's so many, when it's your first dog like that, there's so many mistakes that get made. So I went ahead and went to a started test, and we passed that. And then I worked my way up through HRC, and I didn't get her title until she was 4. It took me, but she never failed in HRC. She did 1 started, 3 seasoned, 5 finished, and she never failed a single test at that. So we got our HRCH, and then we're jumping over to the AKC, and that's what we've been doing this summer.
I want to talk more about the AKC stuff and this midweek master that you just ran. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about some of those things that, were probably the biggest learning curve that, you kind of rattled some of those off, but can you kind of talk through some of those things that I think is a lot of the people who are listening to this podcast right now are mentors, right? Like a lot of the early adopters to this podcast are people who probably have had some level of success, and it's hard for us sometimes to remember what it was like, having our first dog. So I think that this is a good opportunity for us to kind of walk through some of those things that that you wish that other people could have helped you along with faster, and who probably don't
Just
have
as
Chris
far as
Jobin to help
specifically
you.
Hunt Test stuff.
Yeah, Hunt Test
Well,
game.
one thing that people that get into, and I've got to, because Chris does this too, is people that get in the hunt test thing don't understand all the specific vocabulary, just like something like scalloping. I mean, you say that if you're around someone who's just getting into it, they're not going to have any idea what that means. And I personally have never seen any big vocabulary list that you can go and look at. I'm sure you could probably Google search some of this stuff.
I'm going to tell you this app that you should get, and everybody that's listening to this podcast should get. It's do you have an iPhone? I don't know if it's on Android. It's just type in retrievers, and it's this little icon. It looks like oh boy, that's never going to focus, but it's a little R, and it literally has drill index, and in there is just a list of all the common terms. And
fantastic!
Right. So it's made by the same app company that makes the Map Marks app, where you can do your setups. So it looks almost identical. So Google Map Mark or in the App Store, look at Map Marks, and then that retrievers thing, because it has a little description. Then it has the sources, so you can see the books that come from it. So that's a nice. I'm glad that you brought that up, because I've never even talked about this. It has behavior index, where it, what's creeping, what it means, called dig back, scalloping, and we can look at the definition. A scallop occurs when a dog takes a correct cast but then fades to the direction that it was originally heading. Many judges consider a scallop a cast refusal. A trainer should recognize it a failure to maintain a line after the correction but brief response to a cast and deal with it accordingly. How to modify the behavior. And then it gives you drills from the drill index. So
does that app also talk about just hunt test stuff like procedures? And that was something that got me, was all the little procedures, like you're supposed to go up and do this and then say that and do this and now you grab the gun.
I don't think it does.
That was a big one for me too. That stresses me out more than anything. Just the procedures from the time they say dog to the line until it starts. That section has always really stressed me out. Just on my end, it's like, okay, I've got to make sure and put the gun on safety, and then I've got to put it over there, and I've got to, now I'm in AKC. I can on a walk up, I can only say sit one time, which this last test I said it twice and they didn't hear me. I should have failed. But it's like all those little things have always been stressful to me.
That's a good thing to note. I think I might make some YouTube video. I've been thinking about doing this exact thing, of making some YouTube videos of okay, here's what's important from this step to this step. From you're in the holding blind, here's what you should be doing in training. Then you take a few steps. Okay, now you're working your way to the line. Here's what your responsibilities are here. Okay, now you're at the bucket, depending on what level. And but that's really good. We could dive deep into every one of those little things, but I wish I knew the name of the app, because it just says retrievers on my phone. But that seems like a pretty broad. I think I don't remember how I found it here. Let's see. There's also a website, which it gives me a tiny URL, so that's not going to be able to be read on a podcast. But anyway, I hope that helps.
Sounds like
I could
for sure.
I could text it to you. Anyway, so terminology, which makes sense. It's like another,
and just expectations of because you'll hear a pro saying, well, hold them to a high standard. Well, I've never done this. I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, what is
I don't know what hold them to a high standard for me and a high standard for a pro are not the same things. I mean, the high standard I see for my dog versus my last dog, I mean, it's like, wow, I've held her to a super high standard compared to my last one. So it's just like all of that learning curve of my big turning point as a trainer, honestly. And I would suggest anyone do this, find a pro that's willing to let you to work with them. So last year, I think I was up at Flatliner Kennel for 13 different training days, where Chris was just right behind me. And that was the big turning point for myself as a trainer. And then Georgie's progressed night and day from that point on. I mean, she had already passed, I think, a finished, I'm trying to think where she was. I'm pretty sure she had already passed. She'd already had her season title and she had probably passed an HRCH already, but just when to blow the whistle, how to read your dog, how to just all the little nuances that you cannot learn from a video, because tutorial videos like, here's how you do it. But what a tutorial video can't show you is the nuance of your relationship with your dog and how to handle the personality of your dog compared to a different dog, which is something I'm a black and white person. It's like, oh, okay, when do I blow the whistle? Well, it depends. But in this situation, you said to blow it. Yeah, but this situation, what's the same situation? Yeah, but you shouldn't blow it in this situation. I mean, it's like so nuanced. And so when I was with Chris for those 13 days last summer, it just changed everything for me. Just the understanding of just so many things. I mean, just when to blow the whistle is a big one, but just what the standard should be watching all his dogs. So, I mean, there's pros around everywhere. You can find a pro to go and watch. Trust me. I'm sure you can find a pro to go and watch.
My favorite thing to do, and I'm sure this was the same for you, is I love going and hanging out with pros. Like, great, I get to run my dog, but really, I get to watch and just observe all the things that's going on with all these other dogs. And my favorite part is to be like, why did you do that at that point in time? And then, you know, sometimes it's, well, they go into this long story and you're like, okay, great. And a lot of times it's because of this. And you're like, yes, that's why I thought you did it. And then you can retain that information. So I have about 4 different pros that I train with regularly. And I love, like, that's like, they all do things a little bit different, but like, I'm starting to get to the point where I'm like, I not like fully understand everything that they're doing, but I feel like I'm absorbing that information. I think that's more valuable than running your own dog. Personally.
Oh, for sure. Well, yes. If you can get the best of both worlds, that you can sit there all day and watch, and then when you run your dog, it's the type of person that will sit behind your back and actually coach you. And for me, I was lucky enough that I got them all on video. So every session I did out there last year, I've got on video. And you go back and play it back, there's so many things I didn't even hear him say because the advice is coming quick. You're trying to work your dog, and man, it's just invaluable information. But you're right, watching, because you will see pro trainers handle different dogs completely differently in the same situation. And if you've got a good one, that most pros, this is their passion, so they're happy to talk about it. They're happy to tell you why they did what they did. So absolutely.
Yeah. What was it that kept you going? Because you reached your goal, you got an HRCH. Why'd you keep going?
I just really enjoy it. I mean, it's a whole different season. My hunting season ends. I don't do any formalized training during hunting season. When it's hunting season, we hunt. I mean, I've got a regular job. I've got 2 different podcasts. I've got all these videos to make. It gets dark basically before I even get home. We're not training. We just don't train. But once hunting season ends about March, then now this is hunt test season. And I thoroughly enjoy it. And so once we got our HRCH, I was like, I've got more resources than I thought that I would have. I've got a good little training group. There's actually a tech pond that we get to use. That's only 15 minutes we can't just use it whenever, but we have access to it and we do get to use it. So I've got formals. I've got, I go out and I work with Chris Jobman. I've got all the resources that I need to see how far I can get this dog. I've got a world-class dog, and why not at least just see, I don't know, maybe if we run the grand when she's 9, I'm fine with that. If we never run the grand, I'm fine with that too. But I don't know, why stop?
Yeah. That's probably very similar to everybody. I mean, that's my same game. I take like 2 weeks off between hunting season and hunt test season, and then I'm like right back all into it. I try to do all the things my wife is. Yeah. To me, every part is fun. I like the hunt test, but I honestly, at this point, I enjoy the training part of it more than anything. Like I'm not as lucky as you. I don't have I can't drive 15 minutes to go to some tech water. But last year, my buddy did the whole, he was on Google Maps, looked and found some fingers and said, this has to be a person that does hunt tests. And so he just got in his truck, drove an hour, pulled up, and he heard, he said it was the most beautiful thing he ever heard. He had his windows down. He's driving down this long lane and just and I'm going to have her on the podcast. Sharon Gearman, And she has six dogs, like labs, and she has a huge tech water and I think 7 ponds and 2 hay fields. And I train there every day now. She's a field trialer, and I think she's had 7 FCs and 1 Canadian NFC. And she's getting up there in age. She's not doing as much as she's doing, but as she used to. But she did run a trial this last weekend, but yeah. So she has her bird boys show up at 9:30, and she's like, you can come out here every single day.
Wow.
You can train with us or whatever. But I'm normally, I get up at 4:30. I drive an hour. I train from 6 to 7:15. I normally have 1 or 2 other guys that meet with me. Some days I shouldn't say that. Probably 50% of the time I'm still training by myself. But the other days, like we got a little training group, and then 2 days a week we meet there on the evenings, and that's when we do like a bigger setup to make it feel like a test. But I remember I was sitting up on the hill, looking down at her whole property last year, and being like, because we didn't get in there until like, I don't know, maybe September. We found it, so we only had and then she has another training property in Texas that she leaves to in October, right before the Grand, unfortunately. But I remember sitting up there and being like, dude, I never would have dreamt I've had access to training like this. And it has completely changed my goals with dogs because I have access to this property that's like phenomenal.
Right.
And so now I'm like totally just love. I mean, I'll drive an hour. That's what I'm doing. I'm driving an hour every day to train in the morning.
That's
before
crazy,
work because
man.
it's just beautiful. Like it's
you
like,
love it.
man, I'm eating up by the train. I love the training part just as much as I do the testing. Now I'm running an SRS this weekend. I'm really excited because I'm going to, bring the podcast gear and I'll do 4 or 5 interviews there, but it's all my friends, it's all these people that, I've ran the Grand with, all these people that, I've competed with, but like, we don't care. Like, I mean, yeah, we care who wins or loses, but it's like, it's about everything else and the actual like run your dog, in the test.
The whole experience, everything about it, right?
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
I went off on a little tangent there. I didn't mean to. This is about you. So let's jump back into this. So tell me a little bit about, where you are now in your journey with Georgie.
Well, so when we moved over to AKC, like I said, she had never failed a test, and we jumped our first AKC. She failed, and it was the best thing that ever happened to us, really, because it showed AKC is so much more technical from my personal experience. Now, she's only been in 13 tests. 1 started, 3 seasoned, and the rest with either finished or masters. So my experience base is small. So when I'm speaking about these tests, these are my small sample size experience, and in my experience, AKC is harder and more technical than what I ran across in HRC. And the first test that we ran into was really, really hard. I mean, I saw the first setup. I'm like, holy crap. I'm like, if we pass this one setup, I'm going to be so thrilled, because it's like they started running. It's like dogs are like failing, fail. And Lyle, you had Lyle on your podcast, I think.
Oh yeah, Lyle was there. I remember that.
Lyle was there.
I talked to him about this test, and then you talked about it on your podcast, and I was like, oh yeah, I know exactly what he's going through right now.
Right. It was like a 25% pass rate, and Lyle passed the vast majority of the dog. The amateur pass rate had to be like 3-4%. I mean, every series was just really hard, and Georgie got down to the last mark and failed on the last mark, but her cheating, even I'd never come across even a cheating mark in HRC, not a real one. It was all just like bang, bang, bang. And so her cheating was really, but the second series, she cheated a little bit. And so the third series, without correction, she was like cheated worse than I've ever seen. She's like, oh, you're not going to do anything about it. Watch this. She like ran around the globe to get to this one mark. That's why she failed, because she cheated so bad. I never would have guessed she would cheated on this. And I think it erased her brain to where these other marks were. And so she failed on the last mark. But I'm like, man, all right, I know we've got to work on this cheating the bank stuff big time. And then I was having problems with her angled cast. Like I could get a 12-2, but I couldn't get a 12-1-2. Mm-hmm. And so I found myself like, if I wanted a So when I would give her like a 2:00 cast, she would start off at 1:00 and then go back to 12 a bunch. And so to get that 2:00 cast, I'd have to like almost give an over to get her to do it. And so
I call it the Hail Mary cast. Over, and you're looking for your angle back.
Right. So I had, and so after that test, I knew these are the main things that we needed to work on. And I there was a bunch of line manner stuff in there, but I kind of wasn't seeing it at the time. Chris Jobman likes to call them mommy goggles. I think I probably had that. I wasn't really seeing, because she was doing some creeping, because now I couldn't say, I talked to her way too much in HRC. I was doing way too much sit. I take that away, and now her creeping and her vocalizations were getting worse and worse, but I wasn't really seeing that at the time. I was focused on the angles and the water. And over the course of this summer, we've made huge improvements, which luckily I can, I get to talk about with Jobman, and he specifically says, all right, do this, which is extremely helpful. But so with the angles, he got me to, because what would happen was in training is I would give her the angle I wanted. Let's say I'd give her a 1 or a 2 o'clock and she'd still do a 12 o'clock. I'd stop her, recall her, nick, and then recast her, and she would either do it right or she would overcorrect. So he said, well, just don't give her the chance to do that. Just nick her from the start. Mm-hmm. And so I would sit her, nick her, and then she would take the right angle. And I mean, 2 weeks of doing that in training, and I know the problem's still there, so I'm probably being over enthusiastic, but I mean, I saw great gains by just like, stop it, focus, just a little, just like a 3, just nick, take the right cast, damn it.
Slow down.
Yeah. And so those problems we saw huge gains from. And so she passed, we went to Flint Oak, she passed that. And then I'm trying to think, what else was there, another pass in there? Cause we have 3. And then we went out to Flatlander, and she passed both of those out there. But then out at Flatlander, it's when her line manners really started to, because when I was at Flint Oak, Eric Tizon sat me down, he videoed it, and the first series, and he brought me to his truck. He's like, do you want me to really dissect this? I'm like, please, I don't have any hurt. Like, pros sometimes they're worried they're going to hurt my feelings. Like, you're not going to hurt my feelings. This is the first time I've ever done this. I know that I need to learn. So please be honest with me. And he showed me things I was allowing her. She was being in control at the line, and I was just letting her do it. We weren't working as a team. And so he pointed out what he told me I absolutely had to hear. And I didn't even see it. She when she was creeping, I think that I was just so nervous. I just wanted to get her off the line because it's like, oh my gosh, she's about ready to break. She's looking at it, go. And so I was letting her run the whole show. And so then my goals changed from the angled in the water, which we're still working on, to really it's like line manners is really the meat of what we need to be focused on right now.
Yeah. And you're right. It's hard to know what that standard needs to be without actually seeing it. And that might be something that, I could make a little YouTube video on, and it's like, okay, here's what this dog is doing. Here's what you want. Here's the things that you can do to accomplish, work your way to it, which I know you and, we should talk a little bit about what you and Jobman are doing with the Flatlander podcast. But like, I've enjoyed, because you guys have went through the flow chart, and I don't know if there's like so many things that like I haven't learned before, but I've enjoyed it not learned before, things that I haven't heard before, but I like that to hear the same thing walk through from somebody else's perspective helps me like think, oh, that's a better way to explain it than this way, or vice versa. And so I've really enjoyed, kind of walking through his flow chart and seeing, hearing how he does it, because everybody does it a little bit different. But what I think is cool, and I hope that, if you're listening to this and you're just getting started, what I like about what Jobman has done is he's walked you through a full flow of what his program is. Excuse me. That's really important, that his rungs of his ladder are really tight together. That makes the learning for the dog really easy. It's not his way of doing things isn't exactly the way that I do it, or that I've seen other pros do it, but they have a process that they go through. So the rungs of those ladders are really short for that dog climbing that learning ladder. And so often what I think happens, and I made this mistake when I got my first dog, I watched some of Freddie King stuff, then I watched some of Bill Hillman stuff, and then I watched somebody else, and I was trying to just like piecemeal this whole thing together, and my dog was completely confused, like so confused. And it wasn't until I discovered Dan and started just doing Dan's process that I started to understand why all these other people were doing certain things, which they're not wrong. They're great, but they have to be part of that same system. Like the system being consistent is what's really important for dogs. And it's good because I'm assuming Jobman and Freddie King stuff are relatively similar. They train together a lot, and Aiken's whole deal. I don't know if it's exactly the same, but it's
relatively similar. Well, I went up until e-collar training with Freddie, and then I used Jobman on e-collar and force fetch, and then kind of went back a little bit to Freddie, and then I went off the rails and got overconfident and kind of just started going off on my own, and had a huge setback because I just got over. I was like, she's doing great, and I'm just doing all this crazy stuff she wasn't ready for, and the wheels fell off.
And then what'd you do once the wheels fell off?
That's about the time that I really got deeply involved with the KCHRC group, and I got a little test group together. And a lot of those guys are way ahead of me. And so when we were training, because I was beyond the kind of drill points, so a lot of it where it fell off was handling, casting and handling. And so just with my test group, they were kind of leading me through kind of steps I needed to go through. Then I went out with Chris and,
went to graduate school.
Right.
Yeah. What have you enjoyed about your training group, and what has, maybe been a little bit of a challenge that you've had to work through?
Well, I just love being around those guys, and I love being around labs, retrievers. I'm not leaving I personally am just a lab person. I will never own a dog that's not a lab. So that's me. I know there's other good dogs out there, but I love labs. I think they're the most spectacular dogs on the planet. They're everything about them, and being around them and being around guys that love their lab as much as I love mine. And we're all working towards this common goal, seeing the problems they have with their dogs, I'm the least knowledgeable of my training group for sure. And so, which is actually the way you want to be around people who know more than you do for sure. And so the camaraderie, and we don't train a ton together by any means, but it's just another form of an off-season hobby. I don't have any duck depression. It's like a hangout. It's a fun thing. I'd much rather do that than sit and watch a game on a couch. It's just a really enjoyable hobby.
Yeah. That's something that I'm working with. I partnered with the guys at Cornerstone to do the Hunt Test guide. And one of the things that I'm like super passionate about that, I would love to figure out a way for all those guys, all those people that have done Cornerstone and have had success. Like, I want to help you not have duck depression. Come run some Hunt Test. It's amazing. Yeah. It's so much fun. So I think that I'm kind of like, I want to be the Hunt Test evangelist to some degree, because I do think it's so good for you and your dog. Maybe not great for your wife. Your wife might have a little bit of, might be a little bit of a setback in the marriage relationship. But besides that, like, I think it's awesome to run tests.
So let me ask you a question. Do you think that, how hard is it to get to, let's say, an HRCH or a master hunter without the use of an e-collar in training?
Well, I'm actually going to have a conversation with Barton, and I are going to do a podcast on the Hunt Test Hobo coming up here, talking about this very thing. So I won't get crazy into detail on it. I know of two very respected trainers in Wisconsin that have done multiple HRCH dogs without a collar, but I believe they're the exception. I think that the immediate communication is critical to doing like let's just use scalloping. That would be a really challenging thing to fix without an e-collar. But I'm not saying it can't be done. I just think it's a lot easier.
For sure.
But what I do think, go ahead.
No. I want to hear. Just go ahead.
I do think that there's a misconception between, I'll just use the British method of training and then the American method of training, and they're not that different. They're really not. The biggest difference, like in my mind, is we just layer another level of compulsion training that's on top of the foundation that they're already doing. All right. So they're already going through almost everything that, like, when you teach a dog to do something, you don't teach it with pressure. You teach it first to get them to do whatever action that is, and then you reinforce it with the collar. And then eventually, after you've reinforced it with the collar, you can use certain things like force fetch to do compulsion training, where you're saying, okay, I'm going to apply a pressure. You're not going to know how to escape this pressure yet. Then I'm going to show you the answer to that pressure. So in like that situation, like how I force fetch is the way Dan taught me is when you first start ear pinching after you've done hold conditioning, like, which is exactly what the Cornerstone British method is. As soon as you start to transition to that, they've already done fun fetch where they already understand, like, it's a good thing to put that thing in their mouth. Like they've had treats, you've done fump bumpers and said the word fetch, but then you take all of that away, you pinch the ear and the bumpers behind you, and then you reveal it. And then they make that association of, oh, I need that. I have to get that thing in my mouth. And then the pressure goes away. What I think that does for a hunt test dog is it adds another level of, I can make you do what I need you to do. There's a difference, and primarily this is about blind running. I think there's a level of discipline around the line and with bird handling. But for the sake of your question, I think that compulsion training adds another level to it, to where you're saying, I can make you do this, and you're going to do this to a standard, and I'm going to hold you to that. And it's funny, a person who doesn't train with a collar says, I love the way that a dog runs a blind without a collar. And then a guy that runs hunt test or uses a collar says, man, I love the way that a dog runs, with their ears pinned back slightly, but running hard. Because the ears pinned back means I'm not in control, you're in control, talking to the dog, talking to the handler. And I think that that's a fundamental communication difference. And it takes a special dog to be able to understand the difference between, I'm releasing you on your name, you saw those things fall, it's completely up to you, and you're responsible for this part of our test. Okay, I'm saying dead bird, it's my show now, brother. And then doing that, I think that is a difference that I think can be a challenge, but it doesn't mean you can't do it without a collar. I mean, dude who has the second most grand passes ever, I think he either got his CH or he got his first grand pass without a collar. And then Steven started using a collar with the dog when he started running SRSs. I could be wrong in that time frame. He's talked about it on other podcasts. So I'm not saying you can't do it, because to me, denial is a more important tool than an e-collar. And specifically with line manners, I want a dog, and Dan and I talked about this in one of our previous episodes. There's two ways that dogs perceive the line. Either you train it with a wall in front of the dog, where the dog is pushing up against that wall, and that wall typically is an e-collar, right? No, here. And you give them a correction. There's this invisible wall that the dog is constantly pushing. And in that dog's mind, it's thinking, I can get through this at some point. And then when it starts to get through it, it develops this criminal mentality of, I can creep, I can get away with it, I can do this. But if you train it with denial first, and you use denial for any line manner issues, as soon as they make a mistake, you have that bird boy pick up that bird, or you walk out, man, the ultimate thing for a dog is when you walk out there and remove that bird, that dog says, there's no invisible wall to them. It's just, if I am not sitting and doing a good job, I will not get that bird. So I have to sit. My butt has to be on the ground, or I don't get that bird. Now, you lose that if you didn't start that way as a puppy. Like, that's really, you can do it, but it takes a long time to program. But I don't know if I exactly answered your question. Oh yeah,
I think you did.
I'm just saying that I don't think I think it's a good training day when I got a correction but didn't use a collar.
Sure.
So anyway.
I just don't know. And for those of you listening, I am a super novice trainer. I mean, this is the first dog I've used one system. My perception of those other systems, and you can help me change my understanding, is that at what point are they getting the dog to do things when the dog doesn't want to do it? All I see is like, and I have not gone through the videos. I haven't looked through it, but my perception is it's a lot of positive. much heavier on giving treat rewards for hold conditioning and stuff. At what point does the dog not want to do it, and then let the dog know, no matter where you're at, no matter what you're doing, you do it because I say to do it, not just because you want to do it.
Well, and that's what I say. Like, I think that's the fundamental difference.
Yeah.
Like we're making them do it. But I don't, I want to be clear. Like, I don't think that's a wrong way of doing it. I think that is a way that creates, when you get to hunt test level training, where it's that specific, that you're not just trying to put a dog 15 yards downwind. And when you're hunting, like, you don't know exactly where that bird is, you're going to put the dog downwind. You know, you don't need that precise cast to get, you know, that final finish on a tight keyhole blind. Just it's not relative to what their goal is. And I do think that you can do a decent amount of damage with your dog if you don't know what you're doing with compulsion training, force training,
sure, absolutely,
or e-collar training. So I don't have a problem with it. I just think it's important that we understand the fundamental differences with those two different, you know, schools of thought, and also lines of dogs. And this is what we're really going to talk about. So I really should stop. But there's a fundamental difference in the way we have bred British Labs and the way we've bred American Labs. Completely different. And I talk about this on a podcast that I was on with Barton, is that, like, we don't care if they have mouthing issues, American breeds, because we'll fix it with horse fetch. I'm not saying that we're not happy when we see one that has a good mouth, but in the end, we have tools to fix that. They don't deal with that with British Labs, because British Labs have generally, and everything I'm talking about is in general, have a much better hold, natural genetic hold, because that's, if they don't have that, they're washed out of the program. But what I think it's interesting is when you have these American Labs that have been bred for a very specific type of training, start and try to go into a different training program, and sometimes there's a struggle there because they're not bred. But that happens on both sides. I mean, that happens all the time. Like with this bred, this dog is an NFC or out of an NFC. Dog still can't do it. It just happens. But I'm just talking in generalities here.
Well, I look forward to listening to that podcast when you have Barton on. We had him on the Duck Gun podcast one time, and he's a very, very, very cool guy. I was impressed with him as a person, for sure.
Yeah. So what's next? I mean, I've listened to your podcast. I know that you're kind of done with the hunt test season, but to me, I'm like, how can you be done? You still got a month left, man. Like, get another one in.
I start back to work in August 5th. I start back to work.
Oh yeah, that's right. So you're a public school teacher,
right?
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, and that's my August. I'm scouting for teal. So I've got a lot of, and I talk a lot about this on the North American Waterfowler podcast, but I only have my weekends to hunt, and that means a ton of my scouting comes ahead of season, knowing areas, knowing what's growing in areas. And so all of my final scouts before teal season starts, that is going to determine where I hunt if I can't go scout, happen in August. So every single weekend in August, every single weekend right from now until teal season is scouting. And I mean, I would still have some time after work, but yeah, all the hunt tests that I would want to go to now are, like, Lyle's having a couple that are during the week. So we're halfway there. That was my goal. My goal was to get halfway to our Master Hunter title, and we went 3 for 4 this summer. So 3 passes, 1 fail. So we're right on schedule. I didn't plan on knocking out 6 in one summer. So next year,
I was just busting you a little bit, but
yeah. Well, Jobman gives it to me pretty good about, because I picked teal hunting over. I'm a duck hunter, man, and I was we got into a pretty heated conversation with Jobman and Eric Tizon and myself, because they were really letting me have it about Georgie's line manners, because Eric's opinion was that I should have just pulled her and denied her. And I'm like, my goals are not the same as your guys' goals. This is the World Series for me. This is it. It's not, I mean, my whole goal was HRCH. Now my goal is AKC. It's like dog training compared to duck hunting in my life, to how I prioritize them. It's not even in the same stratosphere. I really enjoy hunt test stuff, but duck hunting fuels me and does something to me that hunt testing cannot even come close to doing. It is just a different animal in my life. So it's like once hunt seasons comes close, it's like that's the game. That's it.
Yeah. Well, I think once you, I got 2 comments for you. One is when you run your first grand and you pass, that might change because there's nothing like passing your first grand. That was what changed it for me. Like I was in the same boat. I was like, hunting is here and dog training is here. But then when we had that first grand experience, I was like,
yeah, but I'm not a student of the Hunt Test game. See, the guys in my Hunt Test group they're students of the game like you are. Like my buddy Cole, he's watching videos, he's researching. I don't have that desire to do that. It's not that whole aspect of it. I'm not passionate about. I've got so much. I'm putting out 3 podcasts a week. My schedule's super busy. Going through and just like geeking out over Hunt Test stuff and how to do setups and how to do this. That's just not a passion that I have. I like the Hunt Test game very much, but I'm not a student of the game at all.
Yeah. No, I get that. I can appreciate that. And but the other thing I was gonna say is like maybe not my favorite hunt, because a few of yours are my favorite hunts, but that teal hunt that you had with your dad, and I don't remember if it was Aiden or another. It was not. I know it was another dog that wasn't a lab. I don't remember what it was.
That was Georgie's first and second hunt ever,
dude. I mean, I'm glad Georgie had a good hunt, but I was like, I have never seen birds do that. Like that was like the highway, like so set that up. You're in like a corn strip or something. I don't remember what.
So it was. So there was a cornfield, and in the middle of the cornfield, there was, I don't even know what kind of vegetation it was. Some green vegetation, nothing that I knew what it was, and it was flooded with water, and the water was up into the cornfield, and you came down a long straightaway, and then you dog-legged. And went over and the straightaway was probably 150 yards, I'd say. And then it dog-legged and then went kind of into a hole. We were set up right on the dog leg. And what I describe it as is if you ever watch the first Star Wars where Luke's trying to blow up the Death Star. They're all balled up and they all come and dive down into that little channel and they go try to drop the bomb and blow up the Death Star. That's what these teal were doing. You would see them 600-700 yards away, like flocks of them, and they're coming up high, and they would come, and right when they hit like the front of that line, it was coming up to us at the dog leg, they would all just dive down into that little channel, and then you'd watch them coming straight at you for like 150 yards. And I mean, teal or ducks in general coming straight at you is like the coolest thing to watch.
Yeah.
And they would come and they would either land or they would take that dog leg and keep going, but the visuals were just spectacular. It was best teal hunts ever.
Yeah,
best teal hunts ever.
My favorite part is that you guys were in like green standing corn. It just looked so goofy, but like
it does. It was a weird place. And that was Georgie's very first hunt, and the dog we were hunting with was like a Grisson or I don't know. It was a cool dog, but it was his only second year, so we were so controlled. There was 3 of us, and like we'd have one person shoot, and it'd just be a single, and we were being so selective. So if they hit that elbow and they didn't like put the landing brakes out, we just let them go. So you'd have them at like 15 yards coming, and we'd pass those shots, and that one person would just shoot one. And it was a great hunt for our first dog, Georgie, because I told Jobman, he's like, you cannot take that dog on the first teal hunt. And finally I told him this, I was like, I'm gonna send you this video. This is not your normal teal hunt. We're one at a time, super controlled. Yeah, and she did great. She didn't break a single time.
Yeah, I remember like watching you guys like pass on birds that were perfect. I was like, shoot the bird.
Oh, I caught so much hell on YouTube for the amount of birds that we limited in 45 minutes on the first day, an hour and a half on the second day, and I was getting all sorts of hate about how many shots we were passing up. That's how good it was.
Yeah, that was a good one. I think I thought I did, and then I think you guys, there was a story, it was on either yours or Jordan's podcast about the fastest teal hunt. But this last year, I don't get into too many good teal hunts, but when I go to the UP, there's one public marsh that it's like I stir up my inner Elliot, and we walk, it's like a half a mile with these kayaks, and we'll go up there for Labor Day every week.
For half a mile?
I got wheels because it's an actual path. It's a path. I really shouldn't. No, I don't think anybody's gonna know. Anyway, there's this path with a bunch of wooden bridges, but it's a half a mile, and so I got a kayak, or it's the same. Well, actually, I have the sit on top kayak, but the wheels go in it, which is I don't know if you could do it without like the wheels being in the kayak because there's so much crap that you're going. But I put a dozen decoys in the back, a spinner, and I walked this thing out there. And the first day, and I've hunted this like 3 or 4 years. I've had some like killer hunts and then some ones that are terrible because you can't really scout it. You got to just go because you got to paddle so up into this creek. So anyway, I'm setting this up too long. I get there and the water was higher than it normally is where I can normally beach the kayak. And this one I couldn't. So I had to like just push it into the back of the cattails. And I shot one blue wing the first day and then I dropped my gun in the water and it went like, into the thing. And I became the one shot wonder. Right. So I shoot like, I just can't believe how many teal are here. Like it was crazy. I probably saw like 200 to 300 teal, which is a ton for the UP.
Yeah.
And I shoot like 4 birds and I just got so frustrated that I was shooting like one bird at a time and couldn't shoot another bird. So I just said, okay, I'm going to just get out of here. There's so many birds here. I'm going to come back in the morning. I'm going to clean my gun really good, blah, blah, blah. I go and I like hid the kayak somewhere so I didn't have to drag it back down again the second day. I cleaned my gun really good. I paddle back out there. I get set up and this group comes in. I come up. I shoot. 2 birds fall. I shoot another time. 2 birds fall. I shoot again. 1 bird falls. And then I look over and the group comes back again. I throw a shell in and I shoot again and I kill it. And I said, that has to be a world record for the fastest teal hunt. And I thought I was like, nobody was here to witness this. Nobody's going to ever see this. And I was like, and so like, I would make jokes like, I hold the fastest, record for teal hunt. And then I remember that guy on one of them. He shot. It
was on our podcast. Yeah, he shot 6 in 3 or 4 seconds.
Yeah, but see, I shot him individually mostly. Like I was pretty proud of that.
That's way more fun. That's yours is way more fun. He just shot and they were falling out, but you're like 2, 1. Yeah, yours was way more fun for sure.
And I was so bummed that nobody was there with me. But anyway, that's like my only really good teal hunt. And it was like 2 days in a row. So I'm hoping that Michigan is like that again this year. But it's crazy.
What is that called when you shoot 6? Triple? I know 3 is a triple. What is it when you shoot 6? What is that even called?
I don't know. And out of the same group, I don't know. But I was like, I'll never do that again. And honestly, like one of them wasn't even edible. Like the last one, it came like right back at me and I shot. And it didn't look that bad when Winter brought it back. But then I flipped it over and it's like entire like. I was like, like, ew, that is what it is.
And I love blue wing teal hunting. Georgie's first year, it was her 4th hunt. She broke, and for 3 hunts in a row, she and I had it out as far as being steady. And I wasn't really using the collar a whole lot because I could stop her with my voice and call her back and just deny her. And I had this one teal hunt, somewhat similar to what you were saying, where I got this kayak I didn't take the kayak that day. I just portaged a sled because I thought I could use the sled for her to sit in. End up she was sitting in water. The water wasn't real deep or anything. But anyway, I shot 3 with 1 shot, and she was being unsteady. Every time I pulled the trigger this hunt, she was breaking. But I could stop her with my voice, call her back. I may have given her some light nicks, and then she just watched me go and pick them up. And I picked up every single bird on that hunt. And then after the hunt, I threw some, and that was it, man. That was I won the battle that day. Had I let her break that day, who knows how long it would have been, because it was hunt 4, 5, and 6. Number 4, 5, and 6. She's like, I'm not steady anymore. And that day where I denied her, I broke her back on that day. And if I hadn't won that battle, I don't know, because she never breaks now. She does on land. She will creep a little bit if we're on, like if I'm just sitting up against a tree sometimes, but she doesn't break. But it made me think of that when you're talking about denial, because that was the day that for her life that I won that battle. It's like, you don't go, you don't get it. And those dogs have to sit there and watch you. They're not like that.
Yeah. And you're probably going to have to do with, I don't know what Jobman, I look forward to listening to it, but you're probably going to have to do something where you set up a mock hunt test, like a series of mock hunt tests. Cause I went through the same thing with Winter. I talk about this, I think in one other podcast, but, when she passed her first grand, I was like, oh my gosh, I got to get all these points now to get her second grand pass, to get her title. And I went like, I did like what you shouldn't do. And I did a bunch of tests in a row. And it got to the point where I was like, crap, did I ruin this dog's career, by forcing this, by doing this too fast. And what I ended up doing is I got all my buddies together and we just created this fake hunt test. We had like shepherds and stuff, like other dogs just walking around. So we got the same hunt, the thing. We did the
Right.
whole thing, and we did that in 3 different places. And I didn't put a collar on her, and it was just a physical correction. I had a guy with a crop in the back, just went whack right to her butt, to make sure she understood what it was. I mean, it wasn't, in any sort of like abusive way, just pop. We denied the bird, reset the whole thing. And we did that 3 times in a row. And she has been great ever since. But it's that same thing. Like, and you got to create that same fake hunt test scenario where, because as soon as she knows she has that collar on or here's another dog get a correction, it's over,
Well, Jobman, and if you want to hear all these, the Flatlander Kennel podcast with Chris Jobman is we've got 35, 36 episodes. So if you love the hunt test game, definitely check out our podcast. And we've already recorded this. He thinks the my problem with Georgie goes much deeper than that. He thinks that we need a fundamental relationship change, that I am just not being the alpha enough. And so what I'm doing is tightening up her respect of me in every situation. Just little things like I go through the door before you do. I let her get a little sloppy coming in and out of the boats. And so he just thinks that she doesn't respect me enough. And if I can just be more her alpha and just be more in control over her all the time throughout her life, that will greatly help. He thinks it's a pretty deep-seated problem just with the relationship she and I have, which I don't disagree with him. I'm pretty soft on her. I mean, I correct her when she needs to be corrected, but I just let her get away with way too much, way too often.
Well, you're now realizing what, a high standard is. So you are changing your high standard, and it's going to just take her time to understand that this is the standard. And once you do that, you're going to get what you're talking about. And you have a great opportunity because you hunt so much that, and you're like, I hunt with a lot of people who had their dog trained by pros, and then they run their own dog for hunting, and their timing is just not where it needs to be. Right. Your advantage is that you've trained how to train, and your instincts are going to be kicking in faster now when you're hunting. Like, I think hunting, like, I actually got a few people that reached out this week and said, hey, you should do a podcast about how hunting helps hunt test. And to some degree, I don't know if I actually agree with that.
No, I wouldn't agree with it at all. It degrades.
It degrades it. But what it does do is, I believe, for what your problem is that you're talking about, what Jobman's saying your problem is, it's an excellent opportunity to do that. Like, I have a very solid routine that I don't change when I'm hunt testing or hunting or whatever. I open up the crate. She doesn't get out. Sometimes I'll say other random words. Blah, 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 blah. Hello, what you doing? Waiting. Good. Here. She sits on the tailgate. She waits till I put on her collar. Her butt is on the tailgate the whole time. I take her off myself. I set her down. She sits. She looks at me. We do a little heel routine. I release her. I do whatever I got to do. She jumps on the ATV. We ride to wherever we're going. Like, this is for field hunting. We ride to where we're doing. She sits on that ATV the entire time we set up. She does not get off. And then she proceeds to the dog hide. Okay.
Yep.
Any sort of whatever, you're going to get a correction for, because you understand the standard of what we're asking for when we're hunting here.
Oh, that's exactly the kind of stuff that Chris is talking about with me. It's because a lot of times with her, it's like, well, do whatever the hell you want until it's time to work. And right. I mean, honestly, and it's like and it is about changing your own definition of what the standard is, because any person that's never really trained a dog that sees Georgie around me is like, oh my gosh, that's the best trained dog I've ever seen in my life. But now we're talking about a different thing now. We're talking about, we're inside this niche of trained dogs, and now we're going to elevate. We don't want to be the bottom of that pool.
Yep.
Let's elevate it and refine it as much as we can. So it's just, for me, it's just all the learning curve of what the standard is. My goal in a couple years, I'd like to get a sibling of Georgie, and because I've had her spayed, and I just have never forgiven myself for it. What an idiot, an absolute fool. But I'm going to get a sibling of hers in a couple years, 2 or 3 years, and that will be really interesting to see. I'm really excited. I'm already excited about that dog, because this will now be the second dog that I've taken everything I've learned and started from scratch. And maybe that's the dog I'll take through the Grand.
Yeah. It could be
that. Maybe Georgie never will.
Yep. Well, we don't know that, but what I will say is your foundational things that you're going to do with this second dog are so much different than
Right.
what you did with Georgie. And I have enjoyed my second, third, and fourth dog so much more than my first dog because I can think like a dog more, and I can understand I can understand what they're thinking and adapt my training. And I'm not a black and white person anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, when they're puppies, I'm pretty black and white, but
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. Well, we probably should wrap this up. I try to hit about an hour, and we're about an hour and 20, which, I could chat with you forever. But anyway, why don't you tell folks how they can follow you? Because, I think that they're going to really love it, and maybe
Sure.
they don't follow you already.
Well, if you want to hear the dog training stuff, I'll go to the Flatlander Kennels podcast with Chris Jobman. That's we release an episode every Wednesday, and that is pretty much 100% dog training stuff. And then I've got another podcast, the North American Waterfowler podcast. That's mostly hunting stuff. I mean, there's dog stuff in there too, but mostly hunting stuff. That's twice a week, Monday and Thursday. And I've got my YouTube channel, Freelance Duck Hunting, where I post about almost every single hunt that I go on, except if it's a skunk. I don't always post it, but where I'm just, then that was over on YouTube, also on Instagram, Freelance Duck Hunting over there as well.
Do you tell us a little bit about your app, because I've really enjoyed it. But tell us a little bit more about it.
So the app is called the North American Waterfowler. And the idea of it is when you get done with the hunt, you're just logging everything about the hunt, where you were, you name your location, where you were, how many birds you harvested, just all of the weather information, everything you can think of. And then that data, when you go into the site, will be kicked out into number of hunts, number of bird harvested, average birds per hunt. With just last year, we added dog retrieves, which last year was the first year I'd ever tracked the number of dog retrieves, where you can add a picture of your dog and keep track of their number of retrieves throughout the season. You can add pictures from your hunts. It's just an all-inclusive place to keep track of everything that you do with your hunting career. There's also a fun little leaderboard thing just for the heck of it, where you can compete, and you can also join with friends. So if you have a hunting group, you can keep group numbers. Oh man, I've been working on that thing forever. We're adding new stuff all the time. So that's an app on iOS and Android. If you just look for the North American Waterfowler.
Yeah, it's a great app. I love it. I didn't track my hunts as much last year. I just had some other things going on, but the years before that I'd been tracking, and I love the shooting percentage part of it, because my cousin keeps track of his, and I just want to beat him. So
a lot of people don't like that, because you have to be really, really diligent to keep track of how many shells that but the cool thing about it is you don't have to keep that stat. The way it's set, if you go 10 hunts and you don't keep track of how many shells you shot, but then on the next 10 you do, it still calculates it properly. So, but a lot of people don't really, really love that part of it. Here's the thing that I love is that I can go in and I can look at individual places that I hunt and look at the numbers for that specific place, or like complexes. So let's say you have a lake named Calvary Lake, but inside that lake, you hunt 10 different spots. So you can name each spot, and then you can look at Calvary Lake. What are my numbers over time? How did I do under different weather variables? All of that data. Or you can look at each spot within Calvary Lake, and it'll say number of birds shot there, your average there, how you do when it's sunny, how you do when it's cold. So if you can just geek out, once you get a bunch of data in there, which I've got, you can just geek out on that type of stuff, which is crazy, because I actually, most people, there's not near as big of a difference between sunny days and cloudy days, according to the app. You can go in and look at the global data. You can say, okay, there's been 29,000 hunts logged here. How do people do versus sunny and cloudy? There's not near the discrepancy between those two as you would think. But mine, I actually do better on cloudy days. I shoot about a half a bird more on cloudy days, which is odd. But the number one variable for ducks is wind, which I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. From 0 wind to 13 versus 13 and above, it's a huge difference in birds harvested. So you can geek anyway. I could go on forever. It's so much fun to play with.
I'll give you my piece of how I used your data to learn a lot. So it's completely different for us. We want cloudy days, we want rainy days. Because in the field, the geese don't move in the mornings. unless there's some sort of weather that's making them move. They'll just walk up and eat grass on the retention ponds. All right, so they just don't leave, or they'll fly to a sod field, and it's hard to hide in a sod field. But and then on a sunny day, we just get bouncing off of our decoys because the reflection, it's terrible. Well, what I did is I bought all dive bomb fully flocked silos, and my kills from before, without just shooting over full bodies or whatever, to fully flocked silos was night and day.
Really?
Because for goose hunting in a field, it's all about reflection.
Just the flocking was the big difference.
The flocking was a huge difference. And the other thing is I probably got a little better, so the data's a little slanted. But I just most of the people in my club, if it's a sunny day, they won't even go out because they just.
That's so interesting.
Well, and the other thing is we can burn a field really easy because in the evening they kind of all come at once.
Yeah.
The whole roost gets up, and then you're like, okay, we're getting them all at once. Versus if you can hunt in the morning, and you got a little bit of weather, you can trickle out 18. You kill your 18 birds, you get out, and the feed stays. So that's why I like to hunt the mornings where we are. But anyway,
we're adding new stuff to that all the time. Eventually, it's going to be the point where you can put whether you're using spinners, what type of ammunition you're using, what type of decoys you're using. So it'll only be a year. I mean, it won't be that long till we add that kind of stuff. And so eventually you'll be able to really, because people in waterfowling think that they know. Oh, we shot birds because XYZ. Well, we're going to find out. We're going to find out. Then it's going to be really cool to do how do people do in a field with silos versus full bodies. And you'll just be able to go in and there'll be all these hunts logged. And we're going to get some answers real quick. Oh, it's cool.
Cool stuff. Well, thanks for doing everything. Thanks for educating the waterfowl community and the dog community, our dog community, with Chris. I appreciate it. I enjoy listening to everything that you guys do, everything that the Doghouse does, and what Bob Owens and Lone Duck does. I appreciate everybody's content. I think that there should be 15 more of us keep producing contents because there's so much information that needs to get out there. So appreciate it. I want to thank our sponsor, the Hunt Test Guide. I've been getting a lot of people reaching out to me and saying, hey, what setups are you doing each day? And I just tell them, hey, go to the Hunt Test Guide and sign up for the team membership. I think it's $30 a month or something like that. And you can see all of Lyle and Clark's setups on a daily or at least three setups a week. I've found that that's been really, really helpful for me just to see what they're doing and make sure that I'm not forgetting about bridge birds or some sort of technical thing that I'm doing. So check out the Hunt Test Guide and see if there's a right course or that membership that's a good fit for you. Elliot, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you have so much going on with all your content. I can't believe how much you produce for the North American Waterfowler. I mean, it's every day I'm driving to training. I'm like, did Elliot do another one? Is Woody showing up today? So, hey, I just want to say appreciate you jumping on today and enjoy your night. I know you just got back from a long trip, so hope you can rest up.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. I really enjoyed it.
It was fun.